pombe ni mzuri.
Ujue bia bwana 180 chupa na utalewa.
Alcohol has for centuries played an important part in people's lives. From celebrations, settling disputes, as refreshments during wars, and during rituals, among other functions. According to the World Health Organization, spirits were commonly used in the 16th century. With colonization, through the 500 years, it spread to many parts of the world, hereby necessitating its commercialization and taxation. Local alcoholic beverages were not regulated, monitored, nor taxed, therefore qualifying as illicit brew. Regardless of the times and place, the implications of illicit brew were negative and evident. The colonial masters were unable to curb illicit brew since the available legal brews at the time were too expensive for the masses to afford. In some countries, legal brew was a preserve of the colonial masters. In Kenya today, according to the NACADA, about 60% of alcohol consumed is illicit brew. This percentage is riddled with mass incidences of blindness, death, low food security, poverty, and deteriorating health conditions that directly affect consumers and the society at large. Every society has its own traditional beverages. These are chang'aa, busaa, muratina, mnazi, and miti ni dawa. This is Shinyaloba Center in the outskirts of Kakamega Town, in the heart of Kakamega County. We are headed to one of the homes where chang'aa is made, in the company of Edwin, our source. We quickly notice the patches of used molasses by the roadside. Edwin tells me that it is a perfect fertilizer. A few steps in and we arrive at the home of Mama Millicent and are greeted by the strong smell of alcohol that fills the air, an indication that preparations of the brew are underway. This home is deep in the village, perhaps its location suiting that of a perfect out-of-radar distillation plant. Mama Millicent warmly welcomes us to her home, but her regular clients are wary of the cameras and unusual-looking guests, some even choosing to walk away. Most of them have been waiting patiently for the brew to be ready, and one of them casually approaches me asking that I buy them a cup of the brew, which goes for only 40 shillings. Millicent, a daughter of this household, is the immediate assistant. She gets up as early as 5 a.m. to brew enough chang'aa for the many clients that stream here every evening. But the drink will not be ready until 4 p.m. Most popular brew is manufactured through the fermentation of bananas, yeast, millet or maize. Here, molasses, a byproduct in the manufacture of sugar, is the main ingredient, which is boiled in a tightly sealed drum, and the vapor, which is ethanol, is then tapped and condensed into liquid form. The liquid is what will be cooled and served to clients in cups and recycled soda and water bottles. Perhaps none of them actually knows that this is a classical example of the chemical process titled fractional distillation. A jerrycan of molasses costs 400 shillings, and 2 of these are more than enough to make enough brew for the day, which yields a meager 1,000 shillings on a good day. The devil is in the detail, and no one is taking chances with the alcohol. The brew is ready to be cooled before it is served. Mama Millicent sits outside the mud hut, watching as Millicent carefully removes the drink from the sufuria. Alcohol is highly flammable, and Millicent admits that one wrong move could burn the entire hut. The remaining molasses are emptied into buckets and are transferred into a separate area. They will be used as fertilizer later on. Traditional forms of alcohol are usually poorly monitored for quality and strength and pose health consequences related to harmful impurities and adulterants.
So we find that for the factory produced alcohol, the toxins are regulated. It's a legalized way of production as opposed to the illicit brew production, whereby they tend to use so many toxins, or rather toxins which pose a harmful effect to the body to speed up the fermentation phase. Factory produced alcohol is much safer as compared to the illicit brew.
Extreme cases have resulted in death, especially where the brews were laced with methanol and other dangerous additives such as car battery acid and formalin. It is barely a week after 5 people died after taking illicit brew in the neighboring Bungoma County, not very far from here.
5 people died in Kanon Village, Kimilili constituency in Bungoma County after consuming suspected illicit brew.
This brings the total number of fatalities to 6 following the deaths of 5 others on Wednesday.
4 people have died and 10 others admitted in hospital in Kimilili in Bungoma County after drinking illicit brew. The incident happened at Kanon Village on the outskirts.
Back at the front of the homestead, clients are now in large numbers, both men and women. I engage them in a small chat about the safety of the brew, and the regulars are quick to defend it.
Sio kama ya mali ingine na huwa watu. Pombe yetu kicontrol. Unakunywa, unaona mimi nafanana mse kweli. Watoto kama hao unaona nafanana mse. So unaona mimi niko na watoto kama hao. Sasa niko mse. Na ujue kuoka, na ujue kukula, ukunywe chai. Hiyo pombe ni mzuri. Kimila tunasema wakati ya babu zetu wanatumia hiyo bombe wakati tunafanya kimila yetu. Na hiyo kimila lazima ikuwe na po. Ikikosa pombe, huyo papa atakurudia, hata mama atakurudia. Hata ukitaka kumtengeneza, lazima utengeneze pombe.
Iko cheap kushinda bia. Ujue bia bwana 180 chupa na utalewa. Na hii 70 cup au kwa sawa.
Increase in alcohol consumption by a community or a nation tends to increase hunger, famine, and poverty problems. Alcohol is related to more than 60 medical conditions. It is associated with diseases including stroke, myocardial infarction, cirrhosis, depression, and accidents such as motor vehicle accidents, drowning, poisoning, and self-inflicted injuries and suicide.
I'd broadly classify the effects into 2, like short-term effects and the long-term effects. Find that the short-term effects in the long run become long-term. For example, alcohol affects different organs in the body, like the brain, whereby it slows down chemicals and pathways of the brain, which are used to control the body. So you'll find the people presenting with altered mood, their reflexes are slowed down, the memory affected. You have organs such as liver being affected. Remember, the major site of metabolism of toxins is in the liver. So if you indulge in excessive drinking, at some point the liver is overwhelmed, causing some permanent change. So you'll find in the long run, these people are at an increased risk of getting liver cirrhosis, fibrosis, alcoholic hepatitis, and the likes. For the brain, you'll find there's an increased risk of getting brain shrinkage. They lose their gray matter, their white matter. So it's in the long run, it's detrimental. You have organs such as the kidney, whereby the hormonal function is altered. They present with dehydration.
Back at the house, the brew is packed into 1-liter bottles, which go for at least 300 shillings, and is now served in cups going for 40 shillings each. The clients here stream into the sitting area at the front of the home and engage in chit-chat as they enjoy their drink, casually engaging in a chat about marriage and households. Mama Millicent serves cigarettes from a small fanny pack where she keeps her proceeds.
I'm gonna do what I can.
Kutengeneza hii pombe nimemaliza karibu miaka 20 nikitengeneza hii pombe, kwa sababu nina watoto wangu hapa wenye watoto wangu waliaka wakaniwachia kama ni wadogo. Sasa nilikosa vile wanaweza kukula, vile wanaweza kufanya. Ikabidi nichukue jukumu nitengeneza pombe, nikipata kidogo ndio wapate school fees, wapate kitabu chochote. Sasa ndio nikatengeneza pombe. Ndio nitengeneza mpaka saa hii. Kuna mmoja ako form 2 na mwingine ako form 1. Kuna mwingine anaingia class 6 sasa. Mtoto jana yangu mwenye alikufa akawacha watoto. Huyo ni msichana yangu. Sasa ndiye ananitengenezea. Mimi mwenyewe siwezi kwenda moto, kazi ya moto ni ngumu. Kwa siku ukiwa na customer unaweza kuuza 1,000 ama 1,500 na ukikosa unaweza lalako na 800 kwa nyumba. Unajua hiyo ukitengeneza inafaa ununue kuni, mtu akuletea maji tena umlipe. Ndio diposa upate mtu wa kuchemshia hiyo pombe.
Curious about the government's involvement in the production and sale of illicit brew, I ask Mama Millicent, who tells me that the local authorities, they too have a share in it.
Hawa wanaingia tu lakini ni kuongea tu na. Si lazima wakulipisha. Serikali inaweza kuja bure. Hapana. Huwa tunalipisha. Tunawapa yako chai kidogo na sisi tunabaki nayo kidogo. Yani unaweza nunulia mtoto kitabu ununue korokoro moja.
After taking one for the road, Edwin says it is now our time to head out and let the clients enjoy their drink. The rising cases of youth alcoholics threatens to alienate them from their families and communities, raising fears of existence of generational conflict and family instability.
Alcohol addiction is basically alcohol dependency. This is a situation where your psychology, both your cognitions and your emotions, have got a dependent, an entire dependence on alcohol to trigger the same reactions that your body would trigger without the alcohol. So in this case, you cannot basically do without, because your body needs the triggers for the reactions that alcohol has now replaced what would normally happen in your body without. So it's basically the dependence, and one cannot live without it to have a function both in their emotions and in their cognitions.
Research has further proven that the alcoholics are unlikely to ensure protection of the hard-earned heritage of resources and uphold the traditional values for a moral society. More importantly, they are unlikely to look for opportunities to improve their lives. Instead, they waste away and become a burden to their families and the larger society.
It is true you have been hospitalized from alcohol addiction, but you've been treated from the symptoms that have come about because of the addiction. So once you're out, you're still in the same body which craves the same trigger. It wants that trigger, so you need to feed it the trigger so that your body reacts, in what you would presumably explain to or understand from an addict's point of view, it's a normal reaction. So they always go back for the trigger, not necessarily for the fact that it is bad or it's gonna put their health at risk. So it is just a classic example of alcohol dependence, which subsequently make them go back to the same local brews.
The Kenyan government has been committed to provision of free primary and secondary education. However, drinking of illicit brew and related practices like prostitution, child labor, and domestic violence affects the education of the children in the household. Alcohol contributes to unruly behavior among the youth in institutions of learning, causing strikes, theft, violence, and destruction of property.
Alcohol consumption, especially of illicit brews, can be curbed by when the government steps in. Like I said, the third category of intervention is to ensure that they normalize and they simplify, basically make it as sociable as possible to educate people about these things. You know, we are in an era of transition. We are experiencing more, what can we call it? Life is becoming more contemporary, so there's a need for us to shift our focus from even the traditional view of illicit brew, because now it causes more harm than good. It needs to be communicated to everyone from the villages to urban centers. And once that is done through government-owned programs, and there are also policies in play that needs to be put into action, basically to make sure people understand and we normalize mental health.
You know, the government needs to go back and look at the source structure, look at the root cause. Why are people consuming the brew? Why are people producing the brew? Is it because there are no jobs? Is it because they don't have a sustainable source of income? You know, address that. You know, also sensitize the community, create awareness on the complications, the effects. You know, assign community health workers to reach out to the communities. You know, yeah, create campaigns to sensitize, to create awareness on how harmful the toxins are, the toxins used in illicit brew. You know, basically it narrows down to sensitization and creating a sustainable source of income.
The last laugh ultimately remains with the government, to ban or not to regulate or not. And as the sun sets every evening, deep in the heart of Kakamega County, the reality of a growing problem hits these households, the face of what is a growing silent pandemic.